And we're recording. Wonderful. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today. We're so excited to have you be a part of the OVMA Career Connection series. And again, we're always glad to have you with us. Today's topic is business and dining etiquette for career success. Is one of the is one that often doesn't get taught, but absolutely shapes how you perceived in the professional environment. Whether you're planning for interviews, networking events, or employer dinners, these are the moments where small details can make a lasting impact. It's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Susan Vernick. Susan is the founder of Etiquette Chic and a professional etiquette educator who has worked with thousands of students, professionals, and organizations across schools, universities, corporate settings. And she brings practical and engaging and highly relatable approach to teaching what she calls power skills, the interpersonal and professional behaviors that build confidence and help individuals succeed. Her work focuses on helping individuals navigate everything from dining etiquette to executive presence, and she has led programs like the one you'll experience today at institutions and professional development events across the region. What makes Susan's work especially impactful to our community is her understanding of how to translate your existing strengths, your leadership, discipline, and experience into a professional settings where expectations may not always be clearly defined. Again, please join me in welcoming Susan Vernick.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. I appreciate it so much, and welcome everybody to today's presentation. Jennifer did a little bit about us, at where I do my training and what I offer. So there's just some few images here about what I've done, but Jennifer pretty much summarized it all. So I'm going to skip past that and move right into my story and why etiquette matters so much to me. Because I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about this, because people often wonder, why do you care so much about etiquette and manners and soft skills? Well, here's why. When I was a young professional, I remember I attended my first dining and networking event, and I was completely intimidated by the dining aspect, by the socializing, by the networking. So I really was determined to study the subject. And so I studied it for years. And then fast forward a couple decades, I was at a military event with my husband, and I had a light bulb moment where I realized that soft skills like etiquette and manners are often expected and sometimes required, but rarely taught. And so that's when my business, Etiquette Chicks, was born. And again, like Jennifer said, my quote there is etiquette builds your confidence and helps you succeed. And I think the important thing to drive home is that it's not about a set of rules that sort of make life more complicated, but it's a skill set that really helps you. It helps you navigate things. And again, it builds your confidence. So here's a little agenda so you can see what we're going to cover. We're covering the dining etiquette, which is sort of just dining etiquette starters, dining etiquette 101. And then we'll go through 4 courses. We'll go through place settings, stemware, and different styles of dining. And then the business etiquette aspect, sort of at the end, we'll hit some of these quickly, which is attire, workplace conversations, networking and interviews, and dining out and a proper handshake. So that's the agenda. And I'd like to start with the basic dining etiquette starters. So first things first, and I know we're sort of doing this without food and without place settings, but that's okay. Like we can still do all this. So I just encourage you to lean into this process. I've done a lot of studying, a lot of preparing and digging into these subjects. So I'd really like for you to take what I've learned so you can just apply it to your life and make your life actually easier. So first things first, I'd like to talk about napkin etiquette. And what does that look like? So I do have a napkin here that I'd like to show you. So first things first, when you sit down at a table, if you're at a professional event, You put your napkin on your lap first. Once sort of the socializing part has finished and you're moving into like the dining aspect of the event. And you can take your napkin and put your fold towards your stomach area. And I'd like to say in my classes, it's not because the etiquette police is walking around saying you're doing something right or wrong. This is actually the best way to use a napkin, because if that fold is towards you, you can sort of open up the corner of the napkin, use it, and then cover it back up. And then that keeps things nice and tidy. So you have your napkin on your lap towards your stomach area. And you sit about a hand width away from the table. So if you put your hand towards you, your thumbs towards you, about the other side of your hand should hit the table. Depending on the table, sometimes there's different sizes, but you want to be about that hand width away. And you can see back to the napkin etiquette, I've tried to, like throughout this presentation, highlight things that I think are particularly important. And you can see I have it highlighted in red there. And I have LL, which means loosely to the left. So if you are at a meal, you're taking a break, you take a phone call or use the restroom, you just take that napkin, you loosely fold it to the left, like I have in the image there, where the arrow is pointing, and you just place it to the left of your plate. And then same thing when you're finished, you just take that napkin. If you remember LL, you always know what to do with that napkin, which is loosely to the left. So if you're taking a break and when you're finished, that's where it goes. And then you can see next on that list under seating, I have B and D. And what do I mean by that? Well, I have an arrow pointing to an image at the bottom of the screen. And if you go like this, and you sort of put your hands down, this makes a B and this makes a D. And so if you're sitting in a place setting, especially if it's a crowded round table, I think many of us have been in that position, whether it's a wedding reception, something where you're feeling a little bit crowded, you can confuse your drinking glasses and your butter dish or your bread plate with your neighbor. So if you do this, you always know B, that's my bread plate, and D, those are my drinks. So I hope I'm conveying that well, as we're sort of don't have place setting to do that with. But if you remember this, you'll know which is the bread plate and which are your drinking glasses. And then those things you hear over and over again, elbows off the table, chew with your mouth closed. The best way to chew with your mouth closed is just take smaller bites than you're used to taking. And this is, again, if we're at a professional setting, something we're really putting our best foot forward. And we wait until everyone's served before we start to eat. Everyone's served at your table. And then salt and pepper. If someone asks for the salt, you keep the salt and pepper together. So they're a couple and they travel together. And then another important point, and we'll go through this a few times, but avoid putting any used forks, knives, or spoons on the table linens once you use them. You want to put them back on your plate, back on your soup bowl. That just keeps everything nice and tidy. And then phones off the table, unless you have some kind of a pressing event, pressing situation. And then in that event, you would just say, you don't have to say what it is, but I have something pressing and I need to have my phone out. So those are sort of some dining etiquette starters. Here's a formal place setting. I have those red arrows because I want to drive home the importance of you're always working from farthest from your plate inward. And so that's whenever a course is brought out. A course is just a fancy name for plate. So whatever plate's being brought out, if it's a soup, if it's a salad, if it's the entree, you're always starting from the outside and working your way in like those arrows show there. That's probably one of the biggest questions I get, because you can sit down at a formal place setting and all of a sudden feel really intimidated. So just remember, you're not digging around in between forks and knives and spoons. You're from the outside working your way in. Okay, stemware. We're going to go over a couple things before I go into the first course, which is our soup course, but stemware and glass etiquette. You can see I have some images there. This is just a quick overview of how to hold a beverage. If it's a wine, you want to hold it by the stem. If it's something that has ice in it already, a water or a lemonade, it's totally fine. You can hold it by the goblet. But you don't want to warm the beverage, and that's actually proper etiquette, excuse me, in terms of how to hold this somewhere. And then that bottom image is just the proper etiquette for filling a glass. That's just so the wine can breathe, the beverage can breathe. But that's a quick overview of stemware and glass etiquette. And then the bread plate. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you can see the bread plate on the image at the sort of the bottom of the screen. And then there's a few things I'd like to cover, I think, that are important. And again, I've highlighted the B and B. What do I mean by that? So whenever you have a roll or a piece of bread, you want to break it, break off a piece, butter it, and then eat it. So that's, you don't really want to be holding a big roll or a big piece of bread, buttering it, and then, eating it that way. You want to break off a small piece. If you're using butter, butter it, and then eat it that way. That's the proper way. And then you want to rest your knife. You can see in the sort of the image at the bottom how that knife is resting. You want to rest that butter knife back on that bread plate once you finish using it. And let's say you're passing. If you have a bread basket, you pass to the right. You can always offer while holding the basket or the bread dish, you can always offer to the person to the left of you. That way they don't have to wait for the whole entire table to get theirs. You could offer and then you pass to the right. And so that's proper bread plate etiquette. Again, just driving home that B&B and then also resting that knife once you've used it. And there's that bread plate. Okay, the first course is soup. And I have that red arrow pointing to that soup spoon. And so obviously we're working again from the farthest from the plate inward. And we know that soup spoon just because it has that larger, interestingly it's called a bowl of the soup spoon. But that's the one that you would use. It has that larger area. And it's your first one from the outside inward. And let's talk soup etiquette. So you can see I have sort of like a clock image. And why do I have that? So if we have a soup spoon and we're enjoying soup, typically we scoop toward us and enjoy soup that way. Proper etiquette has us actually doing it the opposite way, going from, if you're looking like at a clock, the 6 to 12 motion. And that's not to make things difficult. It actually makes things a little bit easier because if you scoop away from yourself in the soup bowl and you sort of skim quietly along the edge, the top of that bowl, that kind of keeps things from dripping. So if you scoop in the soup, skim along that if you need to, and eat it that way, it's actually a little bit more of a tidy way to eat your soup. Try it. It actually really does work. So you're doing that 6 to 12 motion and then enjoying soup that way. Obviously, we're not slurping. The soup comes to you, not you to the soup. And we really don't want to be blowing on our soup. We just want to sort of give it a minute, be sure it's cool, and then enjoy your soup that way. So that 6 to 12 motion, skimming a little bit at the top of the bowl if you need to, and then you enjoy it that way. And then I have an arrow at the bottom. Why do I have that? So if you're resting or you're finished, you can put your soup spoon either on that soup plate where I have that red arrow, or you can put it right back in the bowl like I have in that other image. But either way, you want to have it on the bowl or on the soup plate, not back on the table linens. So that's soup etiquette. And then let's talk a little bit about flatware etiquette. So there are two styles of dining when it comes to using your silverware or your flatware. The first one, I have a red arrow. That's the continental style of dining. And then I have a blue arrow, which is the American style. And so I'm going to do my best to show these. You may use one or both of these. Actually, you can bounce back and forth from American to continental throughout a meal. You don't have to stick with one or the other. Sometimes I'll change based on what I'm eating. It just feels more natural. So the continental is where you see that red arrow. And so that's just your knife goes in your dominant hand, whatever hand you write with. So your knife goes there. And then your fork is in, obviously, the other hand. And you have your pointer finger on the back of the fork. You can see it in that image as well. And so it's actually quite easy. Fork does the holding, knife does the work, and then right up to your mouth. You don't have to switch back and forth. So a fork holds the food, the knife does the work in front of it, and then goes right up to your mouth. If you were doing, excuse me, if you were doing the American style, you would do that exact same thing. You would do what we just did here, except for you rest that knife. You can see where I have that blue arrow. It rests at the top of the plate. You switch over, and then you enjoy it that way. So it just involves switching a little bit. I tend to focus on the continental style of dining whenever I teach at an event, just because it's easier and right up to your mouth. And you can see I have a resting and finished position for the fork and knife. That's if you're resting throughout a meal, and then you can see what that finished position looks like. Okay. All right. The second course is the salad, and you can see I have some red arrows there pointing to the salad fork and the salad knife. And then I just have those different styles of dining. Okay, so if you have your salad course, if you get your salad and you see that they're already bite-sized pieces, you're not really going to need to cut it in any way. You're just going to default to your fork in your dominant hand. You're just going to enjoy your salad that way. If you do need to cut it, you're going to use one of those styles of dining that we just talked about. You can actually cut a few pieces of a salad course, not the whole bowl, but you can cut a few pieces and then just enjoy it that way. It's the one course you can cut more than one piece. And then croutons, croutons. What do you do with the croutons? So if it's an important event, I say skip the croutons. They're hard to cut, and they're also difficult to sometimes eat in one bite. So you can pick what works for you, but they can be a little bit tricky. And then you're going to place that fork and knife back in the soup bowl, the salad bowl or the salad plate once you're finished. And then that would be taken away at a formal dinner. So again, you can just default to your dominant hand if they're bite-sized pieces. If you need to cut them, you can cut a few pieces at a time. That's the only course you can do that. I wouldn't cut the whole bowl. And then you can enjoy your salad course that way. Okay, our third course is our entree. And you can see I have those arrows pointing to the dinner fork and the dinner knife. We're working from the outside inward. And then same thing, you're either going to use that continental style of dining or that American style of dining. Again, you have that knife in your dominant hand. Your fork is in the other hand with your pointer finger on the back. You're cutting and then enjoying it that way, or you're cutting, then resting that knife and switching hands. And then the resting position is if you're at the bottom of the page there, if you're at a long dinner of some type or you're not finished, you have that resting position. And then you can see at the bottom that finished position. Okay, the fourth course is dessert. This is actually the easiest one to navigate. You're not typically using any type of cutting. You can see I have the arrow there. It's either a dessert spoon or a cake fork. And the spoon is for things like pudding, ice cream, creme brulee. And then the fork is for things like cake, cheesecake, or pie. And again, if you see a fork and a knife above your plate, you can see I have the arrow there. You're going to know right away that's for my dessert. So that's what I like about knowing what the different courses are and what each fork is used for. You can sort of look down at a place setting, and it's sort of like a roadmap. You're going to know exactly what's ahead of you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about business and professional etiquette. I just wanted to talk quickly about some the different styles of attire. So you have business casual, you have professional, and you have smart casual. And I have some images up here that I hope help a little bit. But the professional is just a real formal one. You typically think of a suit, a dress, trousers, blazers, and not a lot of like bold colors or patterns. And then that business casual is just sort of one step down from that. Still trousers, khakis, could be a sweater or a blazer, but it's one step sort of down when it comes to the different styles of attire. I like to think of professional, if you think of like a movie, maybe like Devil Wears Prada. Business casual, maybe a little bit more like The Office, if we're thinking of like television shows or movies. And then smart casual, I think of places, workplaces like Google or Meta, just more casual, could be jeans, like a dark wash. It could be a khaki, a button down. Certainly with jeans, you want to be sure you don't have rips or tears, that they look nice and tidy. Everything's obviously ironed and ready to go. You can even sometimes do sneakers, but you don't want any type of gym wear. So you always want to refer to like the workplace. I remember I was doing a presentation for a professional development for a library, and we were talking about smart casual, and I brought up jeans, and she was like, "Nope, no jeans here." So you always want to revert to what the appropriate attire is for the workplace that you're at. Okay, I like to talk a little bit about conversation and social skills. That's always important, whether it's in the workplace or maybe you're out in an event or even for an interview. Try to avoid too many filler words like, and so you can see I have those on the screen. And then don't overuse, try not to overuse totally, actually, like, and awesome. And then being mindful of any type of military acronyms and communication styles. Acronyms are efficient, but not everyone's comfortable with that, or not everyone is familiar with that. So you want to be mindful of that. And then language styles. Sometimes military training does help us to be a little bit more direct, but if you're transferring over to civilian, you want to be careful of things like I have an example here. I need this done ASAP, maybe changing it because you have this to me by this afternoon. And then conversation tips and small talk and conversation tips. I mean, we need those all the time. So what are some things that we can sort of have in our toolbox that help us to make conversation? The first one is no current events, whether that's sports teams, local news, of course, the weather is always a good one. Have a healthy amount of curiosity and active listening. Know when to stop talking and give others a chance. Sometimes if you're in an event and you're like, well, not everybody at the table's had a chance to talk. Be mindful of those things and sort of pause and let others talk. And then know your audience. Maybe you have a common interest or job or hobbies. Those are always great things to generate conversation. And then form method, I have that in red. What does that mean? So this isn't for every situation, but sometimes if you use this acronym, F stands for family, O stands for occupation, R stands for recreation, and M stands for motivation. And those are some things that you can talk about. Again, it's not for every situation. You sort of have to kind of gauge, is this a situation where I'm going to be talking more about general things? And then form, again, family, occupation, recreation, things you enjoy doing. And then M, motivation, things that motivate you. Maybe it's a cause. Maybe you're training for a marathon or something like that. That could be for motivation. And then practice your small talk skills whenever you're in like a safe space. So if you're checking out at the grocery store, maybe you're at a doctor's office, and you can start to practice your small talk skills in a safe space. Obviously mindful of you don't want to cause a line behind you or anything like that. But, practice your small talk skills in safe spaces. And so that really helps. Okay, networking and professional presence. I just wanted to hit on a few things I think that are important. If you're at a networking event, be sure you have that contact information, resume, business card, your LinkedIn profile, or a QR code where you can stay connected. And then when you're meeting and greeting, having a practice introduction really does help. And I know that sounds like a little bit silly, but knowing how to introduce yourself, how to introduce others goes a long way. So things like, hi, I'm Susan Vernick. It's a pleasure to meet you. Not everyone uses that terminology. Find what feels comfortable and practice that. And then practice a proper handshake. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And then obviously the small talk, have that practiced and ready to go. Excuse me. The allergies are terrible up here in Rochester. Anyways, and then use active listening. What's active listening? Active listening is really listening to the speaker and not thinking about what you're going to say or ask. And you really do have to trust that process, but that can make for the best conversations in small talk. And then positive body language is always great for having a professional presence, having an authentic smile. How do you do that? When you smile, if you engage these upper cheek muscles, that really helps to have a more authentic smile. Not that we're faking, but we do have to sort of smile throughout life, at the workplace or wherever we're at. And then knowing your resting face, what your resting face looks like. You can adjust that. So your mirror is your friend, your inner circle. Talk to people, get a feedback. And again, use your mirror so you know your resting face. Excuse me. Hold on. I need to grab a drink. Hold on 1 second, please. Okay, sorry about that. And then having an open stance, that's great for a professional presence where, you're not all crossed and closed up. You have that open stance and that feels approachable. Being mindful of personal space, anything under 18 inches, you're getting into in terms of professional settings. And then good eye contact. Good eye contact is important whenever you're speaking and listening. As a speaker, it's normal to sort of look off whenever you're talking, but as a listener, you want to keep that really good eye contact, not be looking off and appearing distracted. And then interviewing, some common interviewing questions. Be prepared for those. Tell me about yourself. Have that memorized and practice. Of course, Career Services has a lot of this information, but these are just some highlights. Why the position interests you, have 2 to 3 points ready to share. And then why you're a good fit, have 2 to 3 points why you are. And then the strengths and weaknesses, that's always a big one. So strength, identify one and elaborate on that and sort of restate that. My strength is, and have that ready to go. And then weakness, pick one, not your worst one, and tell a little bit of a story. Excuse me. So that could be something like, there was a time where I was intimidated to speak in front of people, but the more I did it, I started with small groups and I moved into larger groups and I've sort of overcome that. So tell me a little bit of a story. Again, you're picking one, not your worst. And that's how you can sometimes answer that one. And then business dining out etiquette. If you're out for like a lunch, for an interview, or it's in a professional setting, waiting for the host or the event leader to place their order and then follow that lead is the best way to sort of make your way through a business if you're dining out for, again, an interview or a luncheon. And then you want to stay in that lane. So if they order like a grilled chicken, you want to refrain from ordering like a surf and turf. Stay in sort of the lane that the leader of the event is ordering. And avoid ordering additional items such as appetizers or desserts, unless they are, and then you can go ahead and follow that lead. And know proper table manners, be prepared to engage in small talk, and then always use the polite expressions of please, thank you, and excuse me. All right, let's talk about a proper handshake. Sorry about that, excuse me. I know we can't do this together, but a proper handshake is you go right in on the web of the hand and not sort of going over somebody. You go in and you hold it for about 3 to 5 seconds, and you want to have a good pressure point. So if one's flimsy and 10's sort of a death grip, you want to be at like a 7. And this is another thing. I have homework at the bottom. This is a good thing to practice with your inner circle. So I would definitely do that. Okay, and thank you. Thank you for your service, your family's service. You can follow me here. I'm going to grab a quick drink, and then I think we're going to do some questions.
So thank you so much, Susan. Yes, please grab a drink. I could,
I'm
yeah,
sorry about that.
no worries. I know that the weather is challenging, and I know I've been under the weather myself, so I completely understand. So I do want to like take some time to open it up to questions. We do have some questions in the chat, and if you have questions in the audience, please feel free to raise your hand and and we'll call on you. But Adele's got some great questions, and I just thought they were fantastic. If you were served meat on the bone, is it ever okay to pick up, like I'm thinking like chicken wings and lamb chops, right? Like, is it okay for you to pick it up with your hands, or do you still have to use like, a fork and knife?
You probably want to stick with the fork and knife, especially if it's a more formal setting. Obviously, wings, I think, are the exception. Those are going to be tricky to try and navigate with a fork and knife. But if it's some type of chicken breast, I would say stick with the fork and the knife.
Yeah, no, I guess if you, like you said, you probably have to know like what your environment is and
Yes.
what's happening. And yeah, I could see, yeah, just it can be a little tricky sometimes depending on where you're at and who you're with. But yeah, that's it. Maybe you just
Yeah.
don't order chicken wings, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And always lean toward, like when in doubt, lean toward the more formal option.
Mm, that's a good question. We do have a question here in the audience. Amaya, hopefully I said your name correctly. Go right ahead.
Yes, you did. Hi, my name's Amaya Mills, and thank you so much, Susan, for the lovely presentation.
Thank you.
I'm currently a public relations graduate student about to go into the corporate world after graduation this May. But I was just curious, could you briefly go over the do's and don'ts kind of in those more casual settings like cocktail hours and things like that, where it's not more of a like formal dining experience?
Just the etiquette surrounding like a cocktail hour.
Yeah, or like events that are more casual. I know like a lot of people have like rules as far as like drinking and things like that, but kind of like I guess the do's and don'ts for a more casual setting.
More casual setting. So I would say the etiquette around that. If it's a some type of business setting, you really want to try and stick to like that one drink rule. I think that's a good place to land. And in terms of like if there's food being served, I think once an important thing whenever you have like a high table event is that if food's being served, you don't want to take food and go right to your mouth. I always use the term take and plate. So take it, plate it either on a napkin or a little plate and enjoy it that way. And then in terms of like networking at events like this, and this is especially important too for like conferences or some time of like cocktail hour where there's socializing involved. Prepare a little bit ahead of time. That goes a long way about some things that you can be talking about. But I think a really important thing is to pause and read the room. Give yourself a second to sort of look around. If it's a place maybe you don't know a lot of people, look for positive body language where you can pop in. And just pausing and taking a few minutes to sort of scan the room also goes a lot, like a really long way in terms of the success of an event like that.
Okay, thank you.
hmm Thanks for the question. Great question.
Yes, it is a great question. Any other questions from the audience? I do have another follow-up question. Adele had another great question. If you aren't sure what the dress code is, what should you do?
I always ask. Like I don't just guess it. So I think it's completely appropriate to reach out to maybe somebody who is coordinating it, and find out exactly what the dress code is. Because I think sort of guessing through that can be a challenge. And always lean, like I said, we were talking about whether we use a fork and a knife for a some type of chicken or something that has a bone, lean in this case as well on the more formal option. So it's better to be a little bit overdressed than it is to be underdressed.
Awesome. Great question.
Great
And
question.
yeah, and anyone else have any questions? Uh, Actually, I do have a question. What's like a really good, if given everything you've presented today, what's the one thing you just, you wish that students would take with them that you think that is a nugget of information that maybe often gets overlooked?
I think really that can vary. Obviously, there are so many different pieces to etiquette, but I think the biggest like nugget of information is this. Take a moment to evaluate where in like the soft skills area do I not feel comfortable? Because like we're so inundated with doing so many different things. Sometimes we go into a situation where we're using soft skills and we're like, I didn't feel like I was great at small talk. I didn't really feel like I knew how to do the dining etiquette. And then we just walk away and then we do that over and over again.
Mm.
So take a minute to like self-evaluate and be like, okay, that's something I could brush up on because they're not hard skills. You just have to learn them and practice them a little bit. So I would say just take a few moments and just evaluate like where are those areas that I need to brush up on? Kind of like what I did with the dining etiquette. Like I just remember being overwhelmed by that and just sick of it. Like I'm going to learn this. And so just evaluating what are the soft skills that I just need to dig in a little bit on.
No, that's a great point. Kind of do that self-assessment there,
Yeah,
a little evaluation there. Yeah.
great question.
Yep. And you know, what's a common mistake that people do at the dining table that that always gets you like every time? You're like, oh, cringe, you cringe every time.
Uh, Probably, honestly, is not saying please and thank you.
Oh, that's a good point.
Honestly, like when you're being served, someone's serving you, of not saying please and thank you. Excuse me when you get up from the table is always a nice touch. I don't really, cringe over that, but it's always a nice touch. But I think the please and the thank you and excuse me, those go a really long way, especially in professional settings, because you're just putting your best foot forward. Like, you just notice that. And so I think that's probably the biggest one. Like dining etiquette, I'm always like, you know what? We're on a journey. We're learning these things. I'm not overly bugged out by like if someone, I'm not looking to try and find somebody make a mistake. But common courtesies, I think that's the biggest thing.
Great point. Like, manners go miles, that's for sure.
Yeah, there you
Uh,
go. I love it.
and in terms of attire, is there something that I like just again cringeworthy every time that I wish people would just know this thing about attire.
I think for attire, probably the biggest thing is be sure it's ironed
Mm.
and be sure it's clean. It doesn't have a stain. Now, I'm a big advocate of like keeping extras like in your car,
Oh,
just
that's a
in
good
case you
point.
have like a coffee spill. I mean, life happens, right? And that's fine. But like ironing, that's a very, very simple thing to do. And I think it's really obvious, when something's very, very wrinkled, if it's not part of the style in some way. And I'm a big advocate of like always stay true to your own personal style. Like we have these different business, professional, casual, and smart casual, but still stay true to your own personal style. But and ironing something, it really goes a long way.
That's a good, I'll share. I want to share mine with you. It's and once I tell you this, you're gonna be like, you're always I'll stick in your mind. It drives me bananas when men, especially when they have the tabs on their suiting, like on the seams in the back, they have the small little tabs, and you're supposed to pull them out. I can't tell you how many conferences
Oh,
where I've
yes.
seen men who's the tails in the back, the seams in the
Yes.
back of the coat, and they still have the tabs, the cross tabs
Yes.
on it. And sometimes I'll stop people. I'm like, look, I don't know you, but I just have to I have to take this off you. Like I have to rip this off. That's one. And then like again, men's suiting, especially is they leave those labels on the seam,
Oh,
on
yes.
the cuffs
Good
of their
point.
jackets. That's a one too. They think that they're supposed to keep them on there, and it's like, no, no, no. That's just just so you know when you're shopping what the brand is. You're supposed to rip
Great.
those off. So those,
Oh my gosh, those are
yeah,
awesome.
those are two. And maybe because I'm always like in conferences and I see that, and I'm like, oh, look,
Yeah.
can I please take that off
Yeah.
you?
No, you're so right, especially where those seams are sewn. Even some dresses and skirts will have that. And we need to be
That's
mindful
a
of
good
just
point.
like snip those and yeah.
Yeah, skirts too. You're right. When they ship them, they'll have those the
Yeah.
slits
Uh-huh.
tag. There's a right word for them, but there's the stitching that's
Like
on
tacked down. Yeah, it's like
tacked.
tacked to yes.
That tacked together. That's it. That's it. That's awesome.
That's a great one.
Yeah. That was just one I wanted to share.
I love it.
uh, uh, well, everyone, do you have any other questions? Happy to take them one more time here before
They
we
were
close
great. They
out.
were great questions.
Awesome, guys. You're also quiet today, but I know it's a lot going on. Well, again, I just want to take the moment to thank Susan today for such an engaging and practical session. You shared some fantastic information that reinforces, things that we often overlook, but are so important to, getting the right foot out the door, and maintaining your professional presence and certainly how you engage others. The insight you provided today, from navigating the dining settings to making strong first impressions, are immediately applicable and incredibly valuable to our students, whether they're going into internships or interviewing. For those of you still in the service, I mean, having a proper etiquette. You might be in a dining situation or being interviewed. Always important to know how to present yourself. Again, I hope that you all found today's presentation engaging, and that you take what you've learned today and you start applying those into your day, into your experiences. Start again, as Susan said, start building those skills, start realizing, what areas that you need to help build up so that you can be most effective. And again, thank you everyone for being part of today's session and your continued engagement with the OVMA Career Connection series. We look forward to seeing you at future programs. And if you have suggestions or ideas, always feel free to pass them to us. And again, thank you to Susan, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Excellent presentation.
Have a great
Thank
weekend.
you. Bye.